The first free practice session for the 2024 Formula One Miami Grand Prix was only half service for Scuderia Ferrari. Charles Leclerc's premature retirement complicates matters, with the Monegasque driver flying blind towards the Sprint Shootout. Carlos Sainz found himself comfortable with the SF-24, an F1 car that in Florida seemed stable. Easy to drive, the red single-seater granted the Spaniard a very good handling in FP1. Car number 55 shows excellent qualities in the fastest sections and is agile in direction changes where the rear manages to follow the front without particular problems. A bit of understeer in the tighter sections, but nothing excessive. Also, very valid is the ability to aggressively ride the curbs to cut the corners, while the racing lines are generally clean. Some small corrections are needed due to the wind and the choice of a lower rear load. Overall, considering the choice made by the Italian technicians following the simulations which were performed this week back in Maranello, we can say that, aerodynamically speaking, they seem to have done an effective work. Maximum speeds were in line with expectations, for now. As for drivability in the slower sections, the maneuverability is good, but not ideal. This is clear by the fact that Carlos Sainz had a deficit of 0.3 in the second sector, as compared to Max Verstappen. The Spaniard lost 0.1 on the straight, more or less matched the performance at turn 12 until the gap started to rise, and then suffered a big and very rapid peak coming out of turn 16, where the Dutchman made a lot of difference and gained another 0.2 in traction. High fuel tests cannot be considered very reliable due to the different work programs of the teams. In conclusion, a positive note for the prancing horse concerns the tire issue. Thanks to a suitable warm-up strategy and the help of higher temperatures compared to the Chinese Grand Prix, the issue of the Pirelli activation doesn't seem to be present. This was an important factor for the qualifying session, as the two SF-24 cars were able to access the maximum grip of the Pirelli tires, thus fully exploiting their potential. Now let's focus on how events unfolded for the two Ferrari drivers in the first qualifying of the weekend, which provided us with the first real feedback regarding the competitiveness of the Ferrari SF-24 cars. Charles Leclerc needed practice, the one he missed in the first practice session due to the disastrous early retirement. Like Carlos Sainz, as soon as the session starts, he takes to the track. The two Ferrari SF-24 cars mount a set of medium tires, not yet used up to this stage of the Miami weekend. An aggressive outlap to maximize tire energy input and optimize warm-up. Once the compounds are brought to temperature, the push mode is activated. Carlos Sainz completes the lap while Charles Leclerc is forced to lift off due to traffic. Then he makes his attempt in the following lap. During the cool-down lap, some changes are made to the ERS system, as well as some tips to maximize performance in certain areas of the track. Ferrari has loaded enough fuel to make 3 or 4 push attempts with corresponding passages to cool the tires. Despite the fact that Charles Leclerc hardly took part in the first free practice session, his feeling with the SF-24 is immediately very good. A fairly aggressive driving style that doesn't unsettle the car. On his next attempt, he even touches the wall. Fortunately, there is no damage to the car, as the check reveals that no issues are present on car number 16. The first cut of the qualifying session goes smoothly. The handling of the red cars is good, although the lap times show a certain gap. Overall, while waiting for the Ferrari drivers to access a more powerful setup, we can say that we need to wait for the next run to learn more. It remains to be seen how the medium tires will perform on the two Ferrari cars. Without previous references, we await the next outing on the track. Now it's getting serious in the second stage of the qualifying session. The tires are still the yellow-banded Pirellis, another brand new set. The wind, both in terms of intensity and direction, is practically identical to a few minutes ago. The warm-up strategy is very particular. The brakes are used quite a bit to input energy into the tire, without zigzagging too much. The revolutions of the engine have risen, which is evident from the scream of the power unit 06612. After the first run, the Maranello team's pit wall advises a double lap to lower the tire temperatures, all without going through the pit lane. The Ferrari drivers do not ask for any corrections on the developable downforce, considering the car's balance to be good. The Ferrari race engineers inform Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc that performance in turns 7 and 8 must improve. To do this, they must sacrifice turn 6. For Carlos Sainz, more must be done at turn 16, where the Spaniard hasn't matched the performance maintained by his Maranello teammate. Settings regarding the mid-corner differential are changed. The goal is to maintain good rotation while trying to shave off a bit of oversteer that slightly bothered them in the previous run. The drivers of the red team thus return to push for the final attempt. The drivability of the Ferrari cars seems consistently good, especially for Charles Leclerc, while Carlos Sainz appears to struggle more. The Spaniard indeed opens up on the team radio, speaking of a less than perfect feeling. Otherwise, at a general level, perhaps the rear is slightly light at high speeds, but nothing concerning. In the slow sections, there's always a bit of traction missing, although they're working on the entry to maximize the exit onto the long straights. Track evolution seems like it could make a difference. At least that's what's being heard on the radio channels of the two SF-24 cars. After a brief pause to gather thoughts and concentration, the two Ferrari drivers return to the track for the most important stage of the sprint qualifying session. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc leave the pit lane, but this time with the red-banded tires. The softs, to be precise. There's only one attempt available considering the remaining minutes to conclude the third part of the qualifying session. It remains to be seen how the extra grip of the softer compound will be managed. The track position is good, the push modes are engaged, and they're off. Charles Leclerc sets an excellent lap, although he's not entirely satisfied due to some minor errors between the first and the third sector of the Miami International Autodrome. Nevertheless, the lap secures the front row behind Red Bull's Max Verstappen, with just a 1/10 gap. As for Carlos Sainz, unfortunately, we have to confirm a lack of good feeling. Unlike his Ferrari teammate, the Spaniard couldn't optimize his performance, especially in the final sector of the Miami circuit, where he arrives with overheating rear tires, settling for 5th place. A real shame because the opportunity to do better was within reach. It's worth highlighting Charles Leclerc's fantastic qualifying performance. Without participating in the first free practice session and using Carlos Sainz's data and references, he pulled out a performance worthy of a top-tier driver. On the front of restored confidence in the single-lap pace, Charles Leclerc has provided an important response to the ongoing voices during the toughest moments. A qualifying session that brings back the smile to the Monegasque, who emphasized how this is a session to consider for working on the points that had proved to be issues for Ferrari in terms of single-lap performance. The different behavior of the cars depending on the tire compound used was evident to many drivers during the sprint qualifying session on Friday. Emblematic was the case of Lando Norris, who very fast in Q1 and Q2, but then only 9th on the starting grid for the sprint event in Miami. The Ferrari drivers with the softer tire found themselves in a better position. But for Carlos Sainz, an error proved decisive. And one last note, it's worth pointing out that both Ferrari cars are ahead of the McLaren, who introduced a big aerodynamic package for the Miami weekend.